Yeah, once she sits down, then I'll connect her. Wife, and it's a wonderful Friday evening, and I'm going to be having a delightful conversation with two people who I find very inspiring. One is my mother, and the other is my daughter. And so it's a conversation across three generations. Um, my mom will be joining us soon, but let me introduce my guest who is already. She is Alaibo Semenitari. She holds a first degree in chemical engineering. She was president of the National Association of Black Engineering Students at the Florida Institute of Technology. During her time as president, she began a beautiful intervention of providing after school tutoring in science and mathematics for children in inner city slums in Florida, in Melbourne, Florida. Um, she also opted to take a break between her first degree and her second degree and to teach mathematics and science to middle school and high school children. Alaibo is currently studying for her master's degree in environmental engineering, and her passion, and this has been a passion she's carried from when she was really young, is to clean up the waters, the coastal waters in the Niger Delta area. Alaibo, you're welcome to Conversations with IB.
Hi, thank you.
My other guest is my all-time role model. Okay, she's already in stream. She's trying to get to connect. Lighting is crazy, but she's trying to connect. I'll take her off, and then once she's able to, yeah. My other guest, as you can see, is perhaps the prettiest of the three of us. She's my mother. She holds a post. She holds a PhD in educational management and planning. She is a principal emeritus. She's an administrator. She's a life member of the Nigerian Institute of Management. She's a fellow of the Nigerian Institute of Management. She was chief commissioner of the Nigerian Girls Guide Association. She is principal emeritus. She was, oh my goodness, I can't stop. Her first and second degrees were in curriculum development and planning. She is founder of six amazing schools and has continued to redefine education in Nigeria and I would say in Africa. She's the first ever Nigerian to start a school, an inclusive school. She believes and she preaches the gospel of inclusivity in education. And her all time mantra is that no child is ineducable. Dr. Christy Toby is also a
Hello,
Dane.
hi everybody.
Hi,
Hi.
mommy. Hi, mommy. I have to move you away from that lighting. Can someone move you from that lighting? It's really bad. They need to take you to where the lighting is better.
Okay, photography pro.
But okay, so I'm going to start straight away. Mommy, I'm coming back to you, but let me start with you, Alaibo. Education post COVID-19. We've had all of these challenges that we've been dealing with throughout this period. COVID has given kids a crazy time. You've had to teach children who are dealing with staying in school with COVID 19. How did you manage to help your children navigate the craziness of the pandemic period as a teacher in a middle school with very restless kids? Hey, mom, you're back on stream. Yes,
Well,
Alaibo, go ahead.
so I guess the thing that we can all agree about with COVID is that it is exposing socioeconomic inequalities in various sectors. And one of those sectors is education. So I worked at a public school. I love my coworkers. I love my boss. They were great. But when the whole thing hit, it depended on how top down management made a plan. You know what I mean? And we are still trying to understand how this entire thing works. So even the teachers and the principal at the school kind of were at the behest of, the district or the local government, and just being like, well, come up with some sort of plan. So for me, what I wanted to do was carry on some of the things that we did in class, especially with younger kids, teaching middle school recently. uh, I just found that, like, with children, consistency is important. With adults, consistency is important. So I imagine my kids. I I never used to do this, but I set up a Google Voice number so my kids could text me or their parents could call me. Besides email, and I tried to make sure that our activities matched up as much as possible. I think one thing that this revealed is, like I said, socioeconomic problems, but also a lack of instructional technology. Like, everybody loves to say that word in education. I feel like everybody wants to be like instructional technology, but they forget that all that technology comes with a sort of training, not just for the teachers, but for the students as well. You know what I mean? So it was very interesting. I spent more hours, more hours in front of my computer than I did when I was at work, which I thought was kind of funny. And of course, I had my special ed babies. So I had to make sure that I was providing them with as much support as possible. And also, I guess there's the parents. I don't know if you guys know, you see all these videos and pictures of frustrated parents with their little kiddos on the internet. And people are like, open up the schools, and you have to think about health and safety, and everybody's different, but it is a challenge. um, and I think consistency is what is important. Most of the parents who had complaints, their issue wasn't just, oh, now my kid has to do everything online. Their issue was, well, every teacher has a different thing, a different platform. And now that I'm back in school doing my master's, all my professors have the same platform. So I just feel like with universities and stuff, the response maybe could be easier or better. But if you have the same platform, if you have consistency, human beings are comfortable with what they know. And sometimes we treat children like they just have to learn it. They just have to do it. This is how we're doing it. So this is what you're doing. But a better approach is to figure out, what would I be comfortable with as well as a human being? I wouldn't want to have 7 different or 6 different subjects, 10 different subjects taught 10 different ways, having 10 different sites I have to go to. I would want some kind of uniformity and consistency. So I would say the two biggest challenges I had were the socioeconomic status, like my kids who didn't have technology or good internet, and we had to find a way in school to get that to them. And the other one would have been trying to have that uniformity and consistency, which I did by talking to the other teachers that most of my students had, so we could keep everything kind of even.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you, Alaibo. You address some very critical issues. The first one is socioeconomic status and how this defines what children benefit from where. And I think that one of the people who can talk about that the most is Dr. Toby, your grandmother, my mother. Uh, she's had to deal with the issue of trying to provide education across strata. In addition, and we'll talk about all of the work you're doing, mommy, with scholarships for children who are in underserved populations. How did you cope in a country like Nigeria where technology is madness? You kept teaching in all your 6 schools, including your visually impaired and hearing impaired children. How did you ensure that children continue to access education in a manner that enabled them feel like they were part of school throughout this pandemic, mommy?
Yeah, education is an everyday thing from birth. It's an everyday thing. So when you take a formal education, it's as if you are just embracing education. No, you started education from birth, from when you are cleaned up, from when you were taught to cry, you were taught to keep quiet. So if you want the children to enjoy education and they don't look at it or see it as if it's punishment, make it interesting. Make it activity packed. Give them opportunity. Believe in them. Give them a chance to prove their own mettle, because every child feels he knows it. So let him try it. Then when he fails, you will know how to nicely, without telling him he has failed, to say, can we try it the other way? So they now believe in themselves, and you see them excited. You see them trying to please you. So education must be broad based, that a child will look at it as a regular thing, as a normal thing. At that point, you don't need to force a child.
But then, how did you achieve this during COVID 19? Because all your schools, you kept teaching. How did you achieve
Yes,
children continuing to enjoy education, including your visually impaired children and your hearing impaired children?
yes, because from the onset, we introduced ICT from the nursery. So the children, their toys were manipulated with the batteries, and they could do things by themselves. So when COVID-19 issue came up, they were not thrown off balance. So we continue with the online teaching. We continue with a virtual teaching. And every child was busy doing it and doing it right. And they were excited because the only thing that they were missing their classmates. But when we put it on Zoom and they see the faces of the people, their classmates they have not been seeing, they are more excited, and it made them to be more interested even with the lockdown, because they'll be greeting themselves, and they call their names and say, let's say we're taking a roll call. Oh, Christy Toby, I'm here. Even I'm here, and they'll be waving at themselves, and they're excited, and lesson starts. In that mood, lesson starts, and right from even the pre-nursery, they have access. So when you start it with uh, as the child grows from the beginning, from A, and you introduce this, whatever lesson you want to introduce, whatever skill you want to introduce, you start it early. That's what I was saying. The child get accustomed to it. So now they are very conversant with it. And by the way, they all have tablets. They have tablets that are very conversant with their ICT to their own level. They are very conversant with it. And so they didn't miss anything except in their friends.
But you heard Alaibo talk about the disparity in economic status. There are children who come from communities that do not have. How do we, and this is talking for you who's been an educationist, how are we going to provide support? How are we going to provide support to children in underserved communities? This is something you've always talked about as an
Yes.
educationist. Didn't COVID 19 show the
We
wide
had a few
disparity
of
between
such
the haves and the have
cases.
nots?
We had a few cases. Uh, for some of them, the parents were not computer literate, so could not even help them to set up. Because in the schools, the teachers were helping them to set up. Some of them, where they live, they have no access to any of these services. Some of them, their parents couldn't get them because of the availability of funds, could not get them the type of uh, telephone they could use in school. It was easy, they can use in school, but at home they didn't have it. So for such people, we try to go extra mile to get them uh, do it half manually. But even at that, because they cannot bring it to the school, because they cannot, we had a depot where such will drop their work and pick their assignments, so
Wow,
that no
okay.
child misses out.
No child is left behind. Alaibo, I'm going to come to you. The matter of ensuring that no child is left behind. This is something you've been very concerned about right from your years in college. And one would wonder, why would you be so concerned about it? You didn't grow up being a child who didn't have. So, what this issue of being concerned about children in underserved populations? You're Nigeria. You've lived in Nigeria. You've lived in the U.S. And you've seen that there are always disparities amongst communities. What is it about providing for underserved communities that drives your passion? And how do you think you can translate that to service in your country, Nigeria?
Okay, so that is a fantastic question. I guess for me, like I went to ABEC, so I went to my grandma's school when it was still fairly new before they developed all these wonderful new things. It was fantastic. But growing up in Nigeria, the public school system is almost non-existent now. It just keeps getting worse and worse. And I would like meet kids who transferred from a public school and decided to go to private school. Like if you're in private school, you pay a good fees, and if you're in a good school that cares about taking this effort the way Granny is now, you are going to get that tablet. So there's going to be a depot where you can drop off your homework. As COVID hits, we're seeing the news coming in and everything. And I was just thinking about Nigeria, like, what are all those children in public school going to do? And then even looking here where I am, it took some of my kids about 3 weeks for us to find some of our kids when we switched to online, and we called, we sent messages. This is at least in a system where at least most people, who are poor here, at least they have some sort of phone because of government assistance, whatever. We called, we emailed. Sometimes our administration had to drive to their homes to look for these parents and their kids. And it's not because the parents are bad, but if you're worried about putting food on the table, you're worried that you've lost your job due to a pandemic, you're scared of catching it because you don't have any kind of health assistance, then unfortunately your focus is not going to be on your child, which is sad, because if your focus isn't on your child, that child is losing out. Even if both your parents aren't focused on you, if you have one, or if you have a grandparent, if you're lucky like me and you have a mom and a grandmom that are wonderful, there's always going to be somebody to there's always going to be somebody to check your work. There's going to be somebody to be like, hey, have you done your work? I hate to say it, but my kids who excel the most come from families where mom and dad finish work, they come home, they can check their work. They have that luxury. Most the kids who their parents are working 2 to 3 jobs, it's not like those kids don't want to try. Some of them excel, they beat the odds, and I'm so happy. But where are those parents may not be educated themselves. Like Granny said, I don't know how to work a tablet, and you're telling me to put my child on Zoom. What am I gonna do? You see what I'm saying? So just always seeing those inequalities really bothered me, because I feel like the access to education, the access to be able to learn, the access to improve yourself, because that's what education provides. It provides you don't have to go to college or university, but you can learn a skill. And people are always like, oh, I don't even learn anything. Like, what am I going to do with geometry? I don't need to know what a box looks like. That's the joke that I always say. But if you think about it, those things teach you how to think. Okay? My great grandma, your grandma, used to force me to have these like little reading lessons as a child, and I grew to love them. And I think she did it for all of us. Um, and it stayed with me so
She
long.
did it. She did it for she did it for every child that grew up in that house. She did it
She
for
did.
me. She did it for my
It was
cousins. She did it
amazing.
for every guest, and then she did it. And she did it for her grandchildren and great grandchildren. I don't know. I don't know how she did it, but she did it. Yes.
And for me, that like made me love reading. And I remember as a kid, I wasn't like the friendliest child, but I did love reading. And my mom would buy me like these giant Shakespeare collections. That's how much I loved reading. She would reward me with books. It was so great. But what that did for me is later on in life, I discovered that I had to study a lot more than my classmates to keep the grades that I had come to, have. And people were like, "Oh my God, Ali's so smart." I was not. I am now. But really, what was happening was I realized that it took me some time to understand stuff that other kids understood quickly. But later on, after I got testing and everything done, I was told, You have a processing disability that affects your learning. However, because my verbal reasoning and my reading skills were so high, and they're still till this day, I literally took a test earlier this year to check this, still testing in the 90th percent for verbal reading and cognition. I use that to make up for my processing disability. Another child with my same problem may not have had parents or a grandma that was a stickler about school, or a great grandma who made her do little reading lessons. They may not have had that. So then they would not know that there was another thing that they could use to make up for this. You know what I mean? So just thinking about that, I'm like, I not perfect, and I'm just one human being, but any chance I get, I do try to make sure that if I'm in a position to teach any child, even when I was tutoring before I went into the classroom, I make sure that that child is getting the best possible level of learning from me. It is very important to me. I feel like science and math education are failing, and I feel like inequality in economic status is pushing that. And just because I grew up fairly comfortable, I mean, does not mean that I have to ignore every other person around me, because we work better when we're all working, like we're all doing well. Yes.
Well, okay, Alaibo, I hear you. I hear you. Mommy, I'm coming back to you. For as long as I can remember, you made it a habit to insist that no child should be left without a choice. Every time you had a chance, you insisted that every child could learn. What do you mean when you say no child is ineducable? Why is that your policy that every child in all of your schools must be taught the way they can learn? You say to me, every child learns in a different way. What does that mean?
I didn't hear you well, but I'm sure you're talking
Okay,
about
let me repeat myself.
this concept that no child is ineducable.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about.
And if we believe that every child has a potential, the potential to learn, if you get down to the level of that child, you can move that child to the top in himself. And you must encourage that child to be sure that he is doing it right. If he is not doing it wrong, right, you don't say you are not doing it right. You said, oh, can we try it this way? And then, even though you are assisting that child, you let the child do the final stage, and he is happy that he has done it. So you build up the confidence into that child, so that because sometimes we have very slow learners. By the time they finish in the school, we had a child who came into class one, seventh grade, who couldn't write his name. We now had to give him extra primary school class lessons. By the time he finished school set, he was the senior prefect of the school. He was the best graduating student, and he has done his PhD now. But when he came in, he could not spell or write down his name properly, or the name of the school he was coming from. So you see, every child, given
Mommy,
the
mommy.
opportunity, will excel.
Mhm. But people are going to ask, and this is about those who insist that you must take in the best to get out the best. What was it that allowed you take a child who seemed not capable, and you still went ahead and believed enough in that child to take that child? What was it that motivated you?
During the interview, we knew he couldn't write his name. You asked him some simple questions, and he could reason. Now, you see, when we talk of IQ of people, if you take a child, the best performer in the best school in UK, to my fishing port to go and pick periwinkle, he will fail. because it's not his area. Unless somebody teaches him or tries to got him to do it right. So you don't judge IQ by the uh, uh, person's just at seeing a person at the first time, and you judge that child, you condemn that child. Don't condemn any child. You cannot condemn any child. And so we say no child is ineducable. And we've proved it. We have so many of them. We've proved that have excelled.
Alaibu, I'm going to come to you because one of the things you do is work with, you have your special needs children who need extra tutoring in mathematics and science. What is your view about your grandmother's policy when she says no child is ineducable, that every child can learn and every child can excel? Do you agree with her? You've been an educator yourself. Do you agree with her?
I do think no child is ineducable, but I will say the way to look at this, or something that you have to think of, is it's two things. One, what we call differentiation in education. So that is, I think, one of the hardest things to do as a teacher, especially from what all the teachers who taught me and counseled me told me, and I took a class on it as well. And what differentiation means is differentiating learning. So changing something about what you're delivering to match different groups of children. If you teach, like I used to teach 100, I think last year I had 120 something to 112 students throughout the year going and coming. You teach all those kids, right? Of course, you want to offer them each individualized, amazing learning. But if you don't teach a small number of children, that's hard. So what you want to do is not every lesson and maybe not every day, but maybe once throughout the concept or a unit, you will take the time to give not really a test, but a small assessment to see where your kids are. That will inform your decision about the lesson. I mostly did this with labs. My kids love labs. I like labs. I did not like trying to catch all the glassware, but my kids broke stuff during labs, or when they try to eat the snacks that I used for labs, but I love labs. So, and then I would take that. The children are all going to perform the same experiment, but maybe some of them are going to have help in the first few steps. Maybe some of them are going to have easier discussion questions. Maybe some of them, for a question or a step or something they would need, I would provide it. And then for the others, I would be like, well, based on this assessment I gave you, and I did this concept by concept, mind you. I don't do it once in the school year and say, well, this is what they know, this is how smart they are. Because like she said, if you take a child that's good at one thing and put them in another thing, they might not excel. And we tend to associate certain things with intelligence, like whenever I tell people my undergraduate is in chemical engineering, they're like, oh, engineering, you're so smart. You can pass without being smart. You just have to stick it out. You know what I mean? It's really not about that. I think somebody who had a degree in something else and who excelled in it is just as intelligent, if not more intelligent. It just depends on what your skill set is, what your interest is in as a child. And it's true that your IQ is a combination of genetics and nurturing. And that brings me to the second thing, the pipeline, the education pipeline. Granny said they had a child who couldn't spell their name in year 7, grade 7, JSS1, whatever you want to call it. This child has gone through school, supposedly, and gotten to this point, and nobody has caught it. And eventually it will get to a classroom where the teacher is like, well, I'm not passing this child till they get it. So at that point, either you have to decide as a teacher to do what you can to turn it around, get the family resources, maybe encourage the child, because I actually had a child like this. And I was teaching the 8th grade and they were still reading at a 3rd grade level. And when I first met him was in summer school. I was teaching summer school and I was like, what is going on, dear? And like he would joke about it and everything. And then I was so blessed to have in my class such a sweet child. And eventually he came to me, he's like, look, I want to pass. I don't want to repeat any more classes. I'm going to go to high school with my friends. I want to play football one day and I need to go to college so I can do that. And he just came to me on his own because like I always try to encourage my kids. If you can't do this activity, that's fine. I keep a workbook, or I used to keep a workbook that had different activities sometimes, so that children who can't do it don't feel bad. Imagine if all your classmates are writing and then your teacher is like, oh, you can't do it. Oh, yeah, sit down there. Like, just stay there. That's really discouraging. So he and I, we made a plan. Sometimes I would let him go out the class to another teacher's class to work separately on something, or I would let him sit next to me. I had a special chair. For some kids, it was punishment because they don't like the attention. But for some kids, they were like, yes, I get to be the teacher's helper. They were not helping, but they loved that chair. And he loved that chair. He loved the special chair. And when I found out he loved the special chair, I was like, hey, do you want to sit in the special chair today if you do your work? And he'd be like, yes, I love the special chair. And I give a lot of classroom incentives. He never thought he would do this. He won Student of the Month, and he was so proud of himself. He was like, I can't believe I won Student of the Month. And I was like, I can. Because it didn't matter that, oh, his grades weren't as best as the next person. It was his growth, you know? So, yes, at that point, I had a stumbling block because the pipeline that brought him to me, there were issues. But when he got to me, I was like, oh, we need to turn this ship around. And I've had kids that I haven't been able to turn it around with either. I'm still learning and growing. But I will always remember this boy because he was such a sweet child. Once he was just embarrassed, and everybody made him feel embarrassed. And whenever I think about him, oh, I get so emotional. Such a sweet child. So, yes, differentiation and the pipeline, two very important things in making sure that children are, you're bringing them all down to a level where they can all receive information.
Okay, so your grandmother is beaming with smiles, and I'm sure it's not about me. She's just proud of you. I can tell. I know her. I've lived with her over 50 years. So I can tell you she's proud, and it's not me, it's you. And I'm not going to hear the last of it. Anyway, both of you. Mommy, coming back to you. Allah has talked about a very, very important principle, and that is the fact that of differentiated learning, finding what works for each child. I want to talk a bit about inclusive education. What you're doing in one of your schools, the one named after you, Christy Toby Inclusive Education Center, where you're taking care of the visually impaired, the hearing impaired, the slow learners, and the extremely brilliant students. And I'm wondering, how do they all work in this mixed bag? You have all of these children learning in the same environment. Do you think everybody is gaining? Is this the way to go? Does it provide help? Mommy?
Yes. First of all, if a woman gives birth to three children and one of the children is hearing impaired or a child with special need, there is no dustbin to throw away that child. If you help or assist one child, you must help or assist the other one. When you take the one that is seemingly or so called, as they put them, so called normal children into school and leave the other one at home, first is you put serious enmity between two siblings. If you see them on the street, you put enmity between two friends or two uh, people that has come from the same area. If you put them together, they're able to appreciate what they have and the other doesn't have. So the hearing impaired appreciates the fact that he can see. The visually impaired appreciate the fact that he can hear. The regular child appreciate the fact that, see, I can see, I can hear. And so they learn to live together. That's why they call the regular people the so-called regular people, the so-called normal, because they know that there is nobody who is 100% normal. Even as we are talking, there are things that are bothering you, but it's not obvious. So when you put them together, you tap what is best or in each child. You see them in my swimming pool swimming, and they're so chatty. You will not, even the regular ones are chatting with them with sign language. So they become friends. They
Wait, wait,
no
wait.
longer
Hold on,
feel that
mommy.
they are deprived. There is no
Hold on for a
enmity.
second. Hold on for a second, mommy. You say the regular children in your school are chatting with the hearing impaired. So all
Yes,
the children speak sign language?
yes. Every child, in fact, even the normal teachers we employ, once a week they are taught how to sign and how to braille. So our regular teachers learn how to braille and how to sign, because at the initial stage it was so expensive, because in every class you try to put an interpreter, a sign language teacher in a class, and it was getting too expensive. So we had to get the regular teachers to learn how to braille and how to sign. So the hearing impaired sees himself as one of the other children. And when we get to teach them skills, all of them learn. Some who are interested in shoemaking will make shoes. Some who are interested in hat making will make hats. Some who are interested in decoration or in barbing or in hairdressing, in addition to their regular classes. So they have extra things that the normal children in regular schools do not benefit from. At the end of the day, they acquire their knowledge. The regular children, in addition to acquiring their knowledge, they can sign. And they will never be unemployed, because as they finish from the university, you ask them how many languages you can speak. Say two: English, native tongue, and sign language, because sign language is a language. So it makes them to be friendly with one another, to play with one another, to have fun. You see the hearing impaired join others in dancing. They use their eyes are so sharp. They follow the steps of the dancing. You have seen them before. You will not know that they are deaf or dumb, but you don't use the word deaf. You just say that special need. They are all special needs. So when you see the special needs with the regular, they enjoy themselves, and nobody is proud of her own, because there is something else I have you don't have.
You know, mommy, I'm going to say this. Every time I get very emotional every time I go to Christy Toby, because I just simply love those kids. When I see them interact, and they're so loving, they're just amazingly loving. I'm going to ask you, I'm moving a bit away from our conversation, and we're talking about education tomorrow. What next? COVID 19 has totally redefined education. I'm going to ask you, mommy. You've been in this education sector for the longest time. You've worked as a principal. You've worked in the ministry. You've worked at the policy level. Your first, second, and third degrees are in planning, both curriculum planning and educational management and planning. How do you see us going post COVID 19? Do you think that we perhaps will see a bit more technology in schools? Do you think that people are going to commit a bit more to doing more for children? What kind of education tapestry do you see for the future, mommy?
We are moving into the new norm. It's a new norm that is evolving. And if Nigeria does not, they will miss out. They will lose out. Because every other part of the world to be the eighth. In fact, it has started being the eighth.
Mm-hmm.
Lessons are taught online. Assignments are given, tests are given online. You stay in your house and make a list of what you want, and plus all that somebody, a dispatch rider brings it to you. It's a new world we are moving into, and it's gone around the whole world that no person will think that it's different. And Nigeria must grapple this. We have got to get our heads together. The federal ministry and the state ministries or governments should look at education again and see that as they're preparing their budget, they now know that they must include ICT, the technology, the everything about it, in addition to the material, the teachers that will teach it, the facilities they will need, knowing fully well that not every child can buy a tablet, knowing fully well that the service providers, not everybody can afford it. So they can
I think the service providers heard us say service providers and they hit us. Because our internet connectivity is failed. It's the service. Oh my God. Well, I'm going to come back. I'm sure once uh it's a connectivity issue. And I'm sure she'll try to join us shortly. Alaibo, there's this thing about budgets and instructional technology. Um, your grandmother has already talked about it, and she's saying governments have to begin to
have a
understand the need.
negotiation with
Okay,
them so that
she's
the
back
service
on.
providers can bring down the price.
Uh, it is connectivity, definitely connectivity. Mommy, aha, is the it,
All right.
the service
The
providers
budget.
the service providers heard you and then they took their internet.
Oh, I think that is true. But they're going to, if they make it less expensive, more people will be involved. More people will connect. If it's expensive, everybody cannot afford it. Then the ministry and must make sure that promotions are only based on ICT compliance. The universities make sure that at the 100 level, that every child, no matter the course, must do a course in ICT. The equipment and whatever that will be necessary to be used must be made available. So we need to go back to the drawing board and make education accessible. Education is power. If we do not, we will lose out. Thank you.
I love that. I love that. I love that. Education is power. We've got to make it accessible. If we do not, we would lose out. Alaibo, I was talking to you. You understand the disparities and the inequalities caused by funding. This is not a Nigerian thing. Let's share a bit of your experience in the United States, where children from low income families and who live in lower income neighborhoods actually do not have access. What are governments doing to bridge that gap, and how are communities helping to bridge the gap where government fails, as government always does?
So I'm going to start with some statistics. I know everybody considers, I don't like the word developed nation and developing nation. I don't love that. But for the sake of this argument, America is a developed nation. And in America right now, 19 million people do not have access to internet. 100 million people, even though they have access to internet, do not subscribe because of the costs. There are stories of children who will like walk to a McDonald's and sit outside and just buy like a tiny little thing of fries so they can have internet to do their homework. Okay. There are like, and when this whole thing started, we had ISPs. I guess the most popular one was Spectrum, and they were offering in connection with the district, the school districts and community, they were offering free internet for a few months to parents because nobody foresaw this going this long. Now you would have to prove you're really low income to get that internet access. I don't know exactly how it's working, but there's some people that still have access to it. So let's think about these, like I said, 100 million Americans that aren't able to subscribe to internet, 19 million where the internet doesn't even reach them. Okay. To put this in terms like in Nigeria, I don't know where you would, I guess if you were living like deep, deep, deep in the village, internet couldn't reach you. Same concept. There aren't even internet providers. And if we're being honest, the internet providers have looked at the situation and they're like, well, it's more expensive for me to build out there. So, if they want to pay for really expensive internet, they'll find me. That sort of situation. But what about people that can't afford this? What are the communities doing? Like I said, companies like Spectrum, um, they joined up with the districts, the education districts, local governments to provide that service. It is indefinite, and in some areas it has ended. So, that's still a problem. And as far as like for me at my school, what we did is when this whole thing started, we gathered every single laptop we could find that we would usually lose in classrooms. Some of them are really old.
I'm so
Um,
sorry. The internet went out on us, so it's
oh,
just come back.
okay.
Well,
Speaking
go
about
ahead.
internet, the internet cuts out. But I guess my point is if we're looking at, you look somewhere here and you're like, oh no, that's much better. But it really requires other people to care. If you're in the United States, it requires you to go to your school board meetings and demand that your children get some kind of equality. It might not be your kid, but it could be your neighbor's kid. It could be your kid's friend. And we should be asking for that. It also has to come from top down. Unfortunately, we are in a time in the US where less emphasis is being put on education. Education is being defunded just before this time. You see what I'm saying? This is not a time for us to not fund education. This is a time for us to think about what do children need technology wise. This is a time to invest in these children. It is very important. And I'm not just saying this because I was teaching and I plan to go back to teaching. But I think it's very important that we're investing in these kids because you don't invest in them now. I'm telling you, look, when children get bored and they don't feel like anybody's there to give them something to do and they don't feel taken care of, it does not end well for any society. Last thing you want is a bunch of bored kids. It is not a good idea. But yes, go to your school board meetings.
So that's for those in the United States. Go to your school board meetings, get involved. I guess get involved is something that works. It doesn't matter if you're in the US or in Nigeria. Getting involved is a big deal. Begin to ask for more. Begin to demand for more. Um, uh, and again, the internet has taken your grandmother off, but she's coming in back in. So yeah, she'll be in shortly. Mommy, the internet took you off. So Alaibo says we're talking about how can we ensure equity for everybody. And Alaibo says in the US, the role of communities getting involved. Let me ask you, Mommy, quite honestly, from where you're standing, education is not getting the right budgets. What can people like you do? You've been chief commissioner of the Nigerian Girl Guides. So and you continue to work. You're currently advisor of the Nigerian Girl Guides. You own a group of 6 schools. You're a trusted voice in education. You're a life member of the Nigerian Institute of Management. What can people like you do? Voices like yours? Oh no, not that again. Um, mm, Internet is giving us a hard time today, guys. Okay, I'll wait for her to come back. But Alaibo, what can people in Nigeria do? What can we do to demand more, to get more?
I'm just gonna be honest with you. Honestly, I feel like in Nigeria, especially when you look at the government, people right now are using social media a lot. I think that that's great. We need to call out the corruption. I'm just
Mm.
gonna keep it very honest with you. There is so much corruption. I mean, you've worked in government and Granny has worked, Granddaddy. And the issue is like, even if somebody says, hey, this is the budget, this is something we need to do, money gets allocated sometimes and then it never finds its way down. And I think that people have to stop kowtowing to some of these politicians. If somebody gives you a grain of rice and keeps a bag of rice for themselves, that is not okay. We should not be satisfied with, okay, well, at least me, I'm taken care of. No, you are not. You are not being taken care of. That person is still hoarding. And I think it comes down to that kind of sort of an individual or a small group responsibility to say, hey, this money belongs to my community, these schools, somebody needs to come in here. Like now with social media, people will post videos of or pictures of something, then the government to see it or the police force to see it, and they'll run to go and do something because they don't want to be projected as such. So I think we need to stay on the next. All the people that are doing the work at home on the ground who are fighting for these things, they should continue. I pray for them and their safety, but they should continue to stay on the necks of these officials and demand that they use the funds they are given appropriately and also hire the right people. It's so important, not just in Nigeria, but here too. You can't hire somebody to be in charge of education who has never worked in education. And if they can do it in the US, am sure they can. They have, I mean, they've done it in Nigeria. And look at how it has ended. Not well. Even a country that has good structure, hire somebody to be in charge of education that knows nothing about education. And what happens? Education suffers. You hire somebody to be in charge of something, they should be experienced. They should have the qualifications. They should at least have the knowledge, or they should show some understanding. So that's my opinion on it anyway.
Okay, so I'm going to end my conversation with you before your grandma comes in. You, Alaibo, what can you do? And Nigerians like you who are in diaspora, who should be coming back home to look after their mothers, by the way. Oh, come on, I'm teasing. You know, I'm teasing. Okay, so what can now talking seriously? There are a lot of Nigerians who are experts out of this country, people like you, professionals. I mean, you're still in school, you're working to get your post grad. But then Nigerians, a lot of Nigerians. Is there something Nigerians like you in the diaspora can do as a give back? Maybe now with technology, maybe commit to giving SAT tutelage or regular school tutelage or trying to teach mathematics what do you think, just the same way you've intervened in inner city slums in the US, are there things Nigerians like you who are out of this country can do as a give back? I'm just wondering off the top of my head.
Well, being your daughter, community outreach is very important to me. So I try to make sure every aspect of my life involves some level of charity. One thing, I guess I have tried to do this before. Unfortunately, it was not successful when I tried to do it, but I did try to offer some sort of college counseling, SAT lessons for kids back home. And something that I really want to do is make I was thinking of making like videos because a lot of the YouTube videos on topics, they're very I feel like the videos are very Eurocentric. The First of all, the accents are very Eurocentric. And then you have like the terminology as well. Like if the things I learned in math in Nigeria, of course it translates math as math, but the terms are going to be a little different. So I think personally, I would like to be able to do more virtual tutoring for kids who are in Nigeria. I currently try to do it here. Sometimes I volunteer. And if there was some sort of organization I could partner up with to provide that kind of free virtual tutoring in subjects, I would be happy to do it because, well, my handwriting on computer is not great. It's not great on paper either. But I'm really nifty with the computer. Like I can type it all out and do all that instead. So yes, that is something that I am thinking of doing. Trying to find some organizations to work with to do that. And I guess Nigerians in this diaspora can do that. You can help virtually by tutoring. You can send donations to trustworthy organizations. You can continue to call out inequality when you see this, and not just for Nigerians, but for other Africans in the diaspora as well.
Well, thank you. Oh, you and you can actually also send systems to public schools so that children can have access. Mommy, sorry, the internet has really been nasty today. But just asking you, what can we do? A voice like yours is a critical voice, and someone has asked, she's worried that a lot of the children will get left behind in public schools. What can people like you do, and what can the rest of us do to get government to look more to providing this much needed technology to kids in these poorer neighborhoods or public schools? How can we help?
I know that government knows what they should do. It's the will to do it. They know what, because they have educationists, they have educators, they know what to do. It's the will to do it, to get it done. And there are organizations that can get together and probably get the government to know how to do what they ought to do. If groups will donate things to schools, equipment, desks, laboratory equipment, and things like that, and government will, commissioner education, for instance, will be invited, or the governor, then I will see that there are needs. There's a need to do that, not for one school, but for all the other schools. There are inspectorate division. They go around schools. They know that there are no seats. They know that there are laboratories are ill-equipped. They know that there are no ICT equipment. They know that there are
And this is a conversation I'm going to have sometime soon with the network providers. How can we even do tech with this kind of
who are
terrible network?
interested, who have education as part of their mission and vision, to go to the ministry, have a discussion, interaction, whatever, with the powers that be, and then they will be able to wake up to their responsibilities. They know what to do. It's just the will to do it. And if our representatives in federal and state houses, if we cannot get to the government direct, we go to the House of Assembly, to the Senate and House of Reps, just as we are talking about rep now. We make noise about education too. We are already making impact on reps, and the minute the Senate rep and state assembly are taking decisions on that. Let us also make noise about education, because it is key to progress. Also, all the non-formal groups should wake up and move out. So it's not only we go on strike for non-payment of salaries or increment and all that. Let us wake up and get things for our children, our future. So that as we dance out of the stage, we are sure that those that are dancing onto the stage are ably qualified to handle the affairs of our country.
Wow. That's hard. We've got to make sure that those who we are raising are properly qualified to take care of our country. It's been a very exciting evening for me having this conversation with, again, I call it a conversation of three generations: my mother, my daughter, and I. And we're talking about something the three of us are very passionate about. I'm going to ask each of them to drop their final words. Both of them are crazy about education. I'm going to start with you, Mommy. You're very passionate about education, and I'm going to ask you, would you have loved to do anything else apart from be an educator?
Let everybody try to raise a child. Pick up a child and raise a child. By the time every adult raises a child, there will be no illiterate in our country.
Hmm, hmm, hmm. Everybody pick up a child and raise a child. I'm going to confess that you do that yourself. The Gabriel and Chrissy Toby Foundation is been involved in providing scholarships for children who cannot go to school, and they fund the education of these children from nursery sometimes to up to university and postgraduate level. And they've got a lot of children currently being going through that foundation, including children in their schools and many who are professionals today in their own right with first, second, and third degrees. Thank you so much, Mommy, for not just for being the person you are, but for giving us, myself, and I think my daughter, um, a critical example to look up to. Thank you for telling us that life should be more than ourselves. Today we celebrate you. I celebrate you because I think that it's the biggest privilege I have. Now, Alaibo, I'm going to come to you. You are trained chemical engineer. You're doing environmental engineering, but since I've known you, you've wanted to teach. Girl, what is it about teaching?
I mean, it's like I said, when I was younger, I hit a stumbling block where I had to start explaining things to myself, and I didn't always have patient teachers who had the skills to understand exactly what I was coping with. I believe education provides you answers. Other people can disagree with me, but you make up you're given what you are. So I want to make sure, to the best of my ability, other people have this opportunity to have something given to them so they can make something with it. Because I feel like if life is just about you, you'll get so bored and you'll have no direction. So it can't be that. That's pretty much it.
Okay, dokes. Well, continue to make us all proud of you. I see your grandmother every time she's looking at you, she's smiling. And I wish she would smile about me this way. That's so, so not okay. She should,
Don't hate, appreciate for me.
it should be about me. Me. I'm her daughter, not you. So she ought to love me more than you. Um, yes, she's supposed to love me more than you. I'm her daughter. You're just someone else's daughter. Okay, so it's been an exciting evening. We've had fun. We've talked about something that is critical. I'm going to end with the words of Dr. Toby: find a child and train that child. Each of us can actually affect another child. So if there's that child in your neighborhood who you can help, please help. If there's that child you can teach to read or teach math or teach anything else, please do. But just be a helper. Reach out and make things better for every child. Next week is another beautiful evening, and by this time, 4 p.m. on Friday, it's going to be another conversation with IB, and it will be my privilege to have you all with me. For my guest this evening, Um, I'm going to start. Mommy, thank you so much for being with us. It was a privilege having you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Miss Sam, Miss Sam, thank you for joining me today. It was a privilege to have you.
Thank you, mommy.
And to you, my amazing guests, always there. Thank you very much. It's been a beautiful evening. And this same time next week, 4 o'clock, let's do this again. Let's have another conversation with IB.